Victorian Italy, 1504. Tuesday, 4 p.m. Renowned hairstylist and up-and-coming painter Leonardo Michelangelo da Vinci toils away in his workshop, in desperate need of inspiration. Lorenzo Lefty de' Medici, head of Italy's most powerful banking family, has commissioned a painting from da Vinci, which is due in 20 minutes. Leonardo's most recent work, The Octopus Man, has been widely condemned by critics, who claim it is, quote, too naked. Making matters worse, Da Vinci's hairstyle has also come under fire in recent weeks, receiving harsh criticism from Italy's strict fashion police. Da Vinci can't afford another embarrassment, not today. Leonardo looks at his wife Mona, a modest, ugly woman, known for her enigmatic hands, witch-wig hair, and missing eyebrows, which had been accidentally removed by Da Vinci during an earlier attempt to style her facial hair. As Da Vinci gazes at his wife's now hairless forehead, somewhere in the recesses of his brain, inspiration strikes. Has he found his muse? Could a simple painting of this simple woman be his salvation? Would Leonardo da Vinci paint the Mona Lisa?
The answer is fascinating. Close, but completely wrong. Keep typing, you'll get it. Imagine a computer that can imagine a computer. You just used one. Congratulations. For the most magnificent computational device in human history isn't found encased in metal or plastic, but in bone. In the bone of our own heads. It's called the brain, an unreasonably complex network of blood-soaked organic wires and electronic folds of tissue that determines what we like and how we like it. If we breathe, when we die, and other processes. But as we explore the recesses of our own thoughts, we're left to wonder whether we think with the brain, or if the brain thinks with us, or some other third interesting option. Are humans truly conscious beings in control of our own destinies, or are we just machines ourselves?
This fascinating question is just one in a long line of questions that our brains have asked ourselves for centuries. Questions like, what are thoughts? What is thinking? Who's thinking what? And what was I thinking when I thought to sit here? The earliest theories of the brain come from ancient Egypt, and before that, pre-ancient Egypt, Pre-Egypt. The Egyptians and the pre-Egyptians believed that inside our heads were smaller, smarter versions of us, driving the every decision of our larger selves, known as ourselves. While in Renaissance Japan, samurai poets wrote of the brain as a, quote, benevolent monster, which controlled the, quote, fearful body. Later, medieval doctors saw the brain as a wizard fetus, living inside the skull and moving throughout the body, and treated the skull and body accordingly. Later, philosophers like Plato Kierkegaard and Karl Groucho Marx posited that the brain was nothing more than a soup of ideas, and the skull its thinking bowl. While cannibal societies of the Amazon saw the brain as more a literal soup, and its skull not so much as a thinking bowl, but as just a plain bowl. Today we know that each of these theories is wrong in their own laughable ways. And thanks to medical science, we also know so much more about our brains than even the smartest thinkers of yesterday could have imagined. We know there's enough electricity in the brain to paralyze a small raccoon. We know the brain has the consistency of yogurt that's been placed in a plastic bag, and experiments have shown that the brain, when placed in a jar, will think almost exclusively of jars. If you could hear the sound of a brain thinking, it would make sort of a wet, squishing, ticking noise. We know that when the brain is overheated, it smokes, and when it is frozen, it cracks. And like the human sexual organs, we know the brain shrinks when it is scared, and expands when it is aroused. And we know there is about as much blood in the brain as you would find in a 7-pound bag of blood. But of course, the brain behaves much less like a bag of blood, and much more like a supercomputer.
But how exactly does this marvelous supercomputer within each of us function?
To answer that question, we must look at the structure of the brain. The brain grows from a stem. When young, the brain is smooth and it's most impressionable. As we age, the brain soaks up information as well as surrounding fluids, and as it gets older, it develops wrinkles, leaving less space for new information and more space for judgment, odors, and nightmares. The brain has 3 main sections: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the posterior sub-mid forebrain. The forebrain is the largest, most confident section of the brain. Of course, we know it can be enhanced with magnets or disabled with darts. But despite all we've learned about it,
there are incredible dangers to this which people don't even understand, whereas many cases I've heard of students in the middle of a final, studying very hard, and suddenly, bam, a little lightning storm in the brain, and killed dead.
This is because the brain is a shifty, suspicious organ. When we ask it questions, it responds much like a magician, by deceiving us. And when we try to dissect it, its 2 halves quarrel and confuse us, leaving us to understand the brain no more than we understand a simple puff of smoke. And this raises an important question. Does the brain control us, or do we control the brain? What we do know is that forcing your brain to your will does not work. An adversarial relationship with your brain can be catastrophic. Instead, you must approach the brain with caution, sneak up on it, and hide your true intentions. For centuries, man had struggled to gain control over the brain, and had consistently failed, until one man made a leap that would change everything. Someone who would help science understand just how to trick the brain into yielding its secrets. His name was Sigmund. The son of humble sex workers, Sigmund was born in Austria's capital city, Brussels, where his parents ran a small sex shop. This Sigmund had a tumultuous childhood, in which he tried to kill his father numerous times. During one of these attempts, Sigmund lost his balance and hit his head on the sex machine in his parents' storefront. In the process, he knocked himself unconscious and fell asleep on the machine, which was shaped like a comfortable sofa.
After recovering some months later, Sigmund would devote his life to studying how this machine operated. And he wasn't just Sigmund. He was Sigmund Applebaum Freud II, who would later drop his middle name and the 2 digits at the end of it to become the most famous Freud in history. Just plain Sigmund Freud.
Freud discovered that asking the brain questions while its owner was lying on a couch, fully clothed, would send mixed signals to the brain and confuse it, making it easier to coax secrets out of it. And these secrets were often portals to memories and dreams, and sometimes violent gibberish. And in this cocktail of fascinating brain activity, Freud realized he had found the edge of the brain, where reality and imagination overlap. And in this overlap, he discovered something nestled deep in a pocket that was surrounded by the brain, a powerful center of consciousness, a small pea-like structure that determines intellect, imagination, and how annoying we become when we are drunk. Freud would call this small pulsating gland the mind, and it would play a key role in man's attempt to control not only the brain, but also himself.
And this is where the story gets fascinating.
Next time on Our Fascinating Planet.
Conventional wisdom will tell you that the brain is an organ that uses electrical impulses to control a nervous system in the human body and self-governing our emotions and movements. And I'm sorry, I just don't buy it.
Last time on Our Fascinating Planet, man looked inward in an attempt to understand himself and found something called the brain, which had confused and mystified man for centuries, until a man examined his own self to understand his brain and discovered something inside it called the mind, which would understand the brain, but not himself, or itself, or ourselves.
The discovery of the mind was a major breakthrough in the study of brain technology. For years we wondered what makes a brain special. Is it simple biology, or if hard work and determination molded the intellects of our greatest thinkers? We now know that the latter accounts for almost nothing. It turns out, much like people, not all minds are created equal. The mind on this model brain is just average size. Scientists have concluded, however, that in great thinkers, the mind is physically larger and therefore metaphysically superior. And while most of us use only 10% of the brain with our minds, a genius's mind uses as much as 82%. It's a genetic lottery. Our mental acuity no more under our control than the position of the stars or our father's whereabouts.
What do we know about the mind? Inside this small gland is a mysterious electrical gel. This gel is made up of neurons, tiny firecracker-like structures, each containing about 15 thoughts. There are more neurons in the mind than there are in any other part of the human body, except the genitals. We know the mind has an intense cherry flavor if eaten and smells like a charred marshmallow when burnt. And we know this fascinating gland has given us some of history's greatest thinkers. William Eleanor Shakespeare is said to have had one of history's largest minds, requiring a special medical collar to keep his head upright. The son of a humble spear shaker, Shakespeare wrote hundreds of plays, poems, and small play poems called plomes, or sonnets, using a mix of English and a nonsense language he made up himself, which today we call Pig Latin. Crowds would travel miles to see these plays, despite being unable to understand more than a few words contained within them. Scholars to this day have been unable to decipher Shakespeare's cryptic texts, but still delight in his surprising use of letters and spaces and tights, all products of a truly great mind. But perhaps the mind most commonly associated with genius is the one that belonged to Albert Einstein. Known as Bert to his friends, Einstein would use his now famous math glasses to devise his legendary formula E equals mx squared, which would revolutionize science as the first math equation to contain mostly letters. When Einstein died, doctors discovered he had a very rare double-mind brain that produced extra electrical charges, which explains not only his genius, but also his persistently unruly hair. In the last 50 years, some of our greatest minds have focused on the computing part of their brains to develop artificial brains, which we call computers, which is a term that is short for computing thinkers. And some of today's greatest thinking thinkers are hard at work, turning these computing thinkers into thinking computers in a field called artificial intelligence, which is short for artificial intellectual diligence.
One of the great problems facing artificial intelligence is ensuring a computer isn't just mimicking a human's behaviors, but believing that it is one. That's why I developed Andrea here. Andrea, are you human?
I am human.
Are you sure you're human?
I am human, yes.
You see, determining the computer's ability to live as a human on a daily basis requires a rigorous yet delicate mode of study. And so, after a brief period of courtship and, of course, her consent, I decided to take Andrea as my wife.
I love you.
We eat dinner together, talk about our days, intercourse together, finish each other's
27, 27, 27, 27, 27, 27, 27.
All right. I finally started to get a true picture about whether Andrea actually believed she was human.
I am human, yes.
Yes, you are. Andrea started talking about children, so it was then that I built our first son, Patrick 2.0. Patrick, say hello.
Hello, Daddy.
Good manners. Firm handshake, right, Patrick?
Firm.
Very good.
I love you.
It's really important that they have a true human experience. We are a family. Oh my God. Andrea?
But our computers are no smarter than our minds, and no less delicate. As computers don't have minds of their own, they are bound to the limits of our own fragile minds. Like any other part of the human body, the mind is delicate and susceptible to malfunctions. Minds are prone to doubt, and this is because they produce ideas, which can sometimes confuse and mislead the brain. And in extreme cases, can result in an almost aggressive form of questioning. Can completely confuse even the most seasoned researchers.
Oh, that one goes there, but this one can't, and this one's inside here, and then you woke up and there's one going, what?
In some cases, the mind, when overloaded, overheated, or overconfused, can pop. And then its pieces can get lost in the folds of the brain. And this is where the term, to quote, lose one's mind comes from. And when one loses one's mind, the results can be startling.
A whale could breastfeed me. Did you know that? I've done it. I've done it. Shelled it out in Acapulco, you know?
So, despite our progress with the brain and the mind, we are still left trying to manage this mysterious supercomputer and its dark overlord. The struggle between these two thinking forces within us has created many mysteries in the human experience. But it has also given us some of mankind's greatest thinkers, writers, scientists, psychologists, and science educator TV presenters. Which brings us back to a similar science educator, art presenter, Leonardo da Vinci. Perhaps one of mankind's best examples of the great power the mind and brain can generate when they work together, no matter what hairstyle they happen to be under. Leonardo da Vinci, like even the most common idiot walking the street today, shows us that we possess, within the boundaries of our skulls, great potential, alongside potentially greater limitations.
Leonardo da Vinci did paint the Mona Lisa, after all, thanks to an extraordinary combination of incredible mind and almost senseless human affection for his hideous, grinning wife. Our brains are our most powerful weapon, but also our most dangerous threat. Astoundingly intelligent organs hidden just out of view, with total access to every one of our body's functions. And this is why it is imperative that we are ever vigilant in our research. For in the age-old battle between the brain and the mind, we can never truly know if what we know is, in fact, what we know, or simply what our brains want us to think we know, if you don't mind. You know?
We are truly in a relationship with our home we call the Earth, and quite frankly, we've been bad boy friends. We don't buy her presents, we forgot her birthday, we didn't listen when she wanted us to go learn how to do some ballroom dancing, and we weren't busy. We pretended like we were busy, but we weren't busy. We could have gone ballroom dancing.